Wow. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos DAF Kuf Lamed Hey. We're going to be learning about a suffix chiyuv bris is not doiches Shabbos. We're going to be learning the question whether someone who was born already circumcised, a noiled mohul, whether you have to be, whether tzarech lahatev mimenu dam bris or not, whether you have to have some extraction of blood or not. There's really a machloikas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and then there's a machloikas tanoim as to what is the machloikas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. We're going to be learning that in the times of Chazal, a baby that was born on the 8th month, right, is considered muktzah. He's considered certainly a non-viable child, for which we'll see whether you can be machalal Shabbos by making a bris or not is one issue, but you certainly may not get involved in machshirei milah because he's not considered a viable child. We're going to be learning the Tosfos inside Kuf Lamed Hey that explains why nowadays we don't apply this concept of a ben ches is considered a mace and therefore is considered muktzah. We're going to have the very important statement of Rabbi Amar Abasi that if a woman gives birth, if she won't be tamei with the tum of Leda, for example, if a woman has a cesarean, theoretically, if no dam left, the natural place where dam leaves, she will not become tamei. Says Rav Asi, such a child will have his bris done on the first day. That the whole din of having a bris done by Yom Hashmini is only when the mother is tamei. Wow. Now we're going to see that this perhaps is really a machloikas tanoim. We're going to establish the rule that nitna Torah v'neschacha halacha. So things that functioned on one way before the Torah was given, once the Torah was given, a new law goes into effect. This is a very big klal of how b'chlal we approached our observance of mitzvahs, especially when it comes to a bris milah and other mitzvahs that were given to us before Matan Torah. But when we keep them nowadays, we keep them because God gave them to us on Sinai. That's the concept here in the Gemara, Nitna Torah v'neschat halacha. And if we'll have time, we're going to conclude with a bomba kasha, that how can we ever circumcise a child on the 8th day from the din of a pidyon haben, from the fact that we have to wait until the 31st day. 30 days have to pass until we're pointed the child from a kohen. That's because every child is a suffix nefel. It may be the child is not viable. And as we learned that if the baby is not alive, as we'll learn Kuf Lamed Hey, a bris cannot be done. The baby is muktzah. So how can you ever make a bris on the 8th day? Suffix nefel. That's a very big kasha. And from the answer of the kasha, if we'll get to it, we'll have time to go through really 4 opinions amongst the Rishonim as to why is it b'chlal that a bris clashes with Shabbos. We know that Mila Bismana is doiches Shabbos, but what is the issue? So we continuously mentioned the concept of choivel, that you can't do choivel. Choivel is a tulda of shchita, of netilas neshama. That's one reason of the Rishonim that is shitas Rashi. But again, we're going to have 3 other opinions, a total of 4 shitas as to what will be the malacha of Mila. All right, Chevra, we left off on Daf Kuf Lamed Daled Amid Beis, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid, the middle of the line, Tanach Rabbanan. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shar kol midbar. Says the Gemara Tanach Rabbanan, concluding the sugya of putting some sort of gauze on a wound. And putting a gauze, as we mentioned, not only is something that prevents the wound from getting infected or scratched by the clothing, etc., but there are certain types of gauzes that actually bring healing. So says the Gemara Tanach Rabbanan that noisan al gaba maka moich yavesh, that we are allowed to put on top of a maka a cloth that's dry. We are allowed to put on a wound a sponge that's dry. However, we cannot put a dry reed, nor dry cloth rags, because on Shabbos we can't do anything that's connected to refuah, right? That's a gezeda de rabbanon of shchika samamanim. So something that brings healing cannot be done. What's the difference between a moichi avesh, that noisten al gaba hamaka, because it doesn't do anything, and the ksisin yavation? Moich means a gauze, ksisin means a rag. It's the same thing. Kasha ksisin aksisin, says the Gemara like kasha. Ha b'chadati. If this cloth is new, it was never used previously to cover a wound, so then it has therapeutical value, and therefore it's prohibited. Ba'atiki, when it was already used once in the past, it's no longer new. Yes, it might prevent the wound from getting scratched or keeping it clean, but it doesn't heal it, and therefore it's permitted. And indeed, Amar Abayam, the last line in the Amid, Shmami no, Hani Kesisin, these new shmatis, new pieces of cloth, masu, they bring about healing. B'chlal, those of us who come from families that were in the shmata business, new shmatis are good. They bring parnasa. Not only do they bring parnasa, guys, when you have good parnasa, you get well as well. It brings healing. All right, let's begin now. Safik bandroigenes. So the Gemara is quoting the Mishnah. When we learned the Mishnah, right, the second line on top of the Amid, Safik means, Rashi says, if you don't know whether the baby was born on the 8th month of conception or whether the baby is born on the 9th month from conception. And as we're going to be learning today, in the times of Chazal, a baby that was born on the 8th month is a non-viable child, right? And therefore, such a child should not be circumcised on Shabbos. And again, more details we'll get as we go through the sugya. But you have a doubt, you don't know whether it's from the 8th or the 9th. Really, as we'll learn again in Kuf Lamed Hey, as we learned a lot in Nida and previously, that we understand that there are certain children that become fully developed in 7 months. And they don't even need full 7 months. They can be developed in 6 months in 1 day. And they're viable. We call this in Yiddish azibitel. So safik can also mean you don't know whether it's a 7th or an 8th. So, and the Mishnah says an androgenous. The androgenous is someone who has both the physical characteristics of a male and of a female. So in the Mishnah we had the following machlokes, right? The Tanakh says you're not machalal all of us Shabbos. L'chora, we're speaking about doing a bris. And Rabbi Yehuda holds that an androgynous, yes, we give him a bris on Shabbos. Says the Gemara Tana Rabbana. The Braisa is going on a pasuk that we have again in Tazviyah. Ubayoim Hashmini Yimoil Bisar Orlo Soy. Orlo Soy is his Orlo. And like Rashi, 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid emphasizes that the same pasuk that's matter. Ubayoim Hashmini is the source that you do a meal on Shabbos. I know we learned many, but we're going to focus on the Ubayoim, which is extra. No matter what, you do it on Shabbos. Oh, and there it says Orlo Soy. Look at the second to last line in Rashi. Is the Mashma Mi'uta. His Orlo couldn't be circumcised on Shabbos, but not another. There's some Orlo that may not be circumcised on Shabbos. So what are we being memayet? So says the Braisa, Orlo Soy Vadai is Doiches Shabbos. That Kuf Lamed Hey, but not Veloy Safik Doiches HaShabbos. Oh, says Tosfos, why do I need to have a pasuk to tell me that if there's a doubt whether there's an obligation? What doubt is the Braisa referring to? The Gemara is going to say soon what the doubt is. But if there's a doubt, look inside the top Tosfos Ninulari, that this Orlo Soy is only an asmachta. We don't really need it. Because the Heicha Teisek Adati L'Chalal Es HaShabbos V'lo Yodanu Imu Bar Chiyuva Mila Oiloi. Okay, just hold that thought. But coming back into the Braisa, Safik is not Doiches Shabbos. Now the Braisa continues. Another detail. Orlo Soy Vadai is Doiches Shabbos. The Lo Yandroigen is Doiches HaShabbos. And on that, like we had in the Mishnah, right, that Rabbi Yehuda argues, Rabbi Yehuda Oimer Androigen is Doiches HaShabbos. Do you know why he holds androgynous as Doiches Shabbos? Because Rabbi Yehuda holds that doing a bris on a androgynous is not a matter of doubt, but va'anush kares. Now, good to mention. First of all, kares is not something that the father will, God forbid, get for not circumcising his child. It's something that that person himself will get if, as an adult, they don't do it. Shitas Rambam is also that Koris only goes into effect when they pass away without a bris. So it's not if you don't do it right away in the day of your bar mitzvah, you're going to chap Koris. But hold on. If doing a milah on an androgynous is only a doubt, is only a suffix, a person who doesn't do something that they're only maybe mechuyev will not, there won't be chayv Koris. So it goes together. He holds that you get Koris, and androgynous, which means it's a chiyuv vadai. So since that Yehuda holds it's a chiyuv vadai, it's not excluded with the arlasai. And indeed, an androgynous is taka doiches Shabbos. Next Bryce and next statement, arlasai vadai doiches Shabbos. V'loy noilad ben hashmoshes is doiches Shabbos. This is common. And guys, ben hashmoshes, we had a machlokes tanoim exactly when that is, whether it is keheref ayin. We had this all the way in the beginning of brachas, and many other times. But let's say ben hashmoshes is going to be 13 and some minutes. Let's say ben hashmoshes is going to be 28 minutes. Whatever this man of ben hashmoshes will be, ben hashmoshes is a time that is either the prior day, or it's the next new day, beginning with the night, or it's ezman bifnei atzmai. But there's a doubt regarding ben hashmoshes. So let's go Friday, ben hashmoshes. Ben hashmoshes would be, just to know practically, if you have a loch of zmanim and you see shkia, first of all, the Alter Rebbe add 3-4 minutes. After you added 3-4 minutes, now you entered ben hashmoshes. For how long? We'll leave, that's already a big machlokes. If a baby is born during that time, so 5 minutes after the shkia on your zmanim, my friends, that's ben hashmoshes. Now, what do? Maybe ben hashmoshes is Friday. If ben hashmoshes from Friday to Shabbos is Friday, then when is the 8th day? Friday. Now, you're not going to do a bris on Friday because maybe ben hashmoshes is Shabbos. And if that's the case, what is Friday? The 7th day. You can't do a bris on the 7th day. So the bris won't happen on Friday. You can't do the bris on Shabbos because maybe Shabbos is the 9th day. And only Mila Bismana, as we learned, is Doiches Shabbos. So you got to do it on Sunday. And by the way, if Sunday is Yontiv, then you push it off further. Oh, that's the pshat. Noilad ben hashmoshes. There's a suffix. It's takanat doiches Shabbos. Now maybe ben hashmoshes is Shabbos. Maybe Shabbos the next week is taka the 8th day. It's only a maybe. And my friends, the same thing is ben hashmoshes Shabbos going into Motzoi Shabbos. If ben hashmoshes is part of the day that it's leaving from, then the next Shabbos is taka the 8th. But maybe ben hashmoshes is the following day. And if that's the case, then Shabbos is the 7th day. Same concept. So whichever ben hashmoshes it is, the next Shabbos, which is either the 7th, 8th, or 9th, right, you won't be doiches Shabbos. Final statement in the Braisa. If someone is born circumcised, that we'll see whatever needs to be done is not doiches Shabbos. Now, before we go on, again, there's a machlekes b'shamay b'silul. Then there's a machlekes tanoim. What is the machlekes b'shamay b'silul? Again, I spoke yesterday to the master, great tzaddik, Rav Nachman Kreiman, by the Lubavitch Shemoil here in Los Angeles, who told me, because I called him up, that he called up Rabbi Shane from Crown Heights. Neither of them ever saw a child that's noilid mohel. And I'm making the statement because many people hear, that baby was noilid mohel, which means the baby is born circumcised. There's something. It's a tremendous anomaly. There is a condition called hypospadias or hypospadias, and that's
hypospadia, Rabbi.
Huh?
Hypospadia.
Hypospadias. Thank you, doctor. So that's a condition that is some sort of defect that's fixable today, where the hole through which the urine goes out is not where it should be. If it's not in the right location, again, that's an issue b'fnei atzmai. There is an appearance that the baby is noilid mo. And so just he told me that when a father tells you, wow, my child was noilid mo, and the moil almost didn't do anything, the stama, he says, in all of his cases, it had the condition of hypospadias. Good. All right. But coming back over here, mamish noilid kishu mo. So there, you don't circumcise. Why not? Why not? Because Rabbi Shammai are the ones that hold that Sarech Lahativ Memenu Dambris. Look inside the Rashi, 6 lines from the top of the Amid. Rabbi Shammai is not talking about Shabbos. Rabbi Shammai is saying that Bechlal, you have to take out blood because Chayshinan Shema Arla Kavushahi. These are the words. Arla Kavusha means that really there's an Arla there, but the Arla is pressed into the foreskin. Okay. Rabbi Nachman told me he has no idea what this means. Rabbi Shane yesterday says he doesn't know what that means. As we're speaking about a Metzias where there's taka no arla, but Beishamai is saying maybe there is, but it's pressed into the member so you can't see it. And listen, and taking out a drop of blood will resolve it. That's the biggest irony. Just showing that people don't know what this Metzias is. Even the Rishonim say they don't know how that works. I'll go more than that. There is a machlekes, from where do you take out that drop of blood? Our minig is you don't take it out from the corona, you don't take it out from the crown, you take it out from the shaft. Where is the arla? The arla, I know where it is, but I'm saying the arla, the issue of the arla is that the arla is covering the atara. You don't even take out the dam from the atara. I'm just pointing all out that the mitzias of what arla kavusha means, these are the words, is something that doesn't happen. Actually, there are many that say, he told me from Rabbi Shane, part of Nishtano Hativim. It's not the mitzias now. But coming back over here, Beishamai holds that chayshinon, Rashi says, that's the way we learn pshat now. Chayshinon, and what's that chayshinon? So you don't do it on Shabbos, because anything that you maybe, you can't, you're not machal Shabbos. Beis Hillel holds, b'chlal you don't have to do it. Forget about Shabbos. Okay. And now, Amar Rab Shimon ben Elazar, this is part of the Braisa. I want you to know, don't tell me machlokes Beishamai and Beis Hillel is during the week, whether a noiled mole needs to have a tafas dam bris, whether you have to extract a drop of blood. Again, we would prick the shaft, not the top, mamish for a drop of blood to leave, but really lenechlaku Beishamai and Beis Hillel an noiled kishuhu mole, that both of them hold shetzarich lahatif mimenu dam bris. Why? Mipnei. The way we will learn now is maybe. That's the key word. That's the way we're learning. Because maybe arla kavushahi. I'm saying all this, that explains the arla soy and not noilot kishuhumo. Because even though, according to his version, even Beis Hillel says you have to do atofas dam bris, because maybe arla kavusha, that's the word. You can't do it on Shabbos. You're drawing blood. Rashi holds drawing blood is chayvel. Chayvel is a tool of shchita, right? It's an extension of shchita, and since maybe there's no arla kavusha, maybe you're not mechuyev. Amen nechlaku, but what according to his version, where is there a machlokes? Al gerish in his guide kishuhumo, this is really common. Someone converts when they are already circumcised. Now there can be many reasons for it. The reason that Rashi gives is gives a mashal that the Arabs they also circumcise. Not do with Yiddishkeit. So if someone who was already circumcised now converts, what do? Another thing that happens today is sometimes is that if a person underwent a non-halachic conversion, and sadly they were told that they're Yidden when they're not, and kubi de bris is not done l'shem mitzvah. You don't know what their kavana is, so they can. And now, thank God, they're making a gir kalacha. A person can convert when they are already circumcised. Beishamai says, interestingly, according, just to know that we paskin, that if someone converts when they are already circumcised, yes, you have to take out another drop of blood. Okay, so now we ended the Braisa. The Braisa gave many examples of a suffix, right? He spoke out the androgenes and ben hashmashes and noilot kishuhumo, that these people their bris or their atafas dam bris does not circumvent Shabbos. Now, the question is the top line in the Amid. The first suffix that the Braisa didn't even explain what that is. So Amar Mar, v'loy suffix doiches ha-Shabbos. So the Gemara is saying, Lasuyei Mai. The Braisa already gave all types of sfeikas, right? We already spoke about an androgenes. We spoke about ben hashmashes. We spoke about noilot kishuhumo. So what does that refer to? Says the Gemara Lasuyei Adu Tana Rabbanon. And that's really what we read the Rashi and DAF Kuf Lamed Dalud Amid Beis, right? The second Rashi from the top. That's the suffix that Ben Shiva, if a baby fully developed in 7 months, so halachically we consider this baby a viable child. So therefore, yes, the bris is done on, if it's bismana, it's done on Shabbos, Michal on Avos Shabbos. But Ben Ches, if a baby is born on the 8th month, he did not fully develop, then a Michal on Avos Shabbos. Because in the times of Chazal, we'll read the Tosfos in a moment, he's considered a non-viable baby. Now, really, just a heads up, the bris itself is not that problematic. the bris itself is not that problematic. But the machshirim for the bris, which may be done on Shabbos, Rabbi Eliezer, is for sure problematic. I'll explain the statement later, but just hold on to these words. Suffix ben zayin, suffix ben ches. That's the suffix that we have on top of the line of the Amid. That's the suffix. You don't know whether it's ben zayin or ben ches. And the same thing, like Rashi said in the Mishnah, you don't know whether it's ben ches or ben tes. That is what the Braisa says, ein mechal in all of us Shabbos, because it's a suffix, whether you're mechuyev to make a bris or not. What's pshat is a suffix whether you chuyev to make a bris. So the Gemara explains, or I'm saying the Braisa goes weiter. Ben Shmoina, hareu ka'even. He's considered halachically not alive. And therefore, listen to this, for asur l'taltaloi, he's muktzeh. You can't even move him on Shabbos. But the mother can nurse the child, not by moving the child, but by bending over the child, because it's a sakana for the mother, says Rashi, and normally you would say, if she's going to lean over to nurse him, she might move him. So let's make a gzeira. You don't make a gzeira not to nurse, not to move, because she's going to get sick. You allow her to nurse, but she should make an effort not to move him. Wow, because he has a din of muktzah. And no one is familiar with this. So before we go weiter, look inside the Tosfos, the last narrow line, very important. Ben Shmoina hareu ke'even v'asur l'taltaloi. Now under the Gemara in Tosfos, nira lidi, the achshav muter l'taltal kol tinoikos. Why? She'ein anu bikiyim v'kulam k'may safik ben ches safik ben tes. Ben Shmoina, let's begin with that, is ke'even. Now, you don't know. If a woman says, I know the baby was born in the 8th month. No, says Tosfos, to all the doctors out there. You don't really know what you're talking about. You say, the baby is born in week 35. I measured the year of the nish. Maybe it's week 36, which is the 9th month. So how did they cheshbon it? They cheshbon it from when she got pregnant, when she went to the mikvah. We don't even know that. We spoke about this in Nidam. It's not. Now, we presume that, let's say that 2 weeks after the beginning of the Veses, the woman ovulates, or the egg is in the right position where it can become impregnated. That's the majority. But we learned in Chazal and Machlekes about this. Look in Tosfos, if the woman's egg is in the right place to get pregnant, around 2 weeks from the beginning of the cycle, it's going to work since that we always do Shivas Nekiyim, so it's mamash perfect. Right, it's right. Samach l'tfilasa, but says Tosfos upamim she'enim esaveres the samach l'tfilasa, and therefore you don't really know when she got pregnant. So first of all, 1 second, but there's a suffix. So if there's a suffix by every baby, how can you mal? So says Tosfos, now we're giving the heads up. Umuter lemulay b'Shabbos mimanav shach. Even though he acknowledges, don't tell me the baby is an 8th-month-old baby. You don't know. It might be a 9th, first of all. So there's a doubt. But still, if there's a doubt, suffix, how can you be mal a baby on Shabbos? Maybe it's taka from the 8th month. So he already quotes, we'll get there, God willing, today. Daf Kuf Lamed Vav on the top of the Amid, the next daf, that even if you know that a baby is ben shmoina vadai, and how will we know that? The husband travels the whole time. The only time he was home, he was not there. You make a cheshbon, we know when they had that one relation, and we know it was 8 months before the birth. And v'yolda, says the Tosfos, nidalari. Oh, let me just, I didn't speak out the Mimanav Shach. Tosfos doesn't explain it. The Mimanav Shach is, listen to these words. Let's say the baby is 8th month, and therefore, halachically, he's ke'evan. What's wrong cutting an evan? Or the words of the Gemara, muter lachatech basar. You're just cutting flesh. There's no problem. In other words, what's the issue? Let's go with Rashi, chayvel. You know what chayvel means? Chayvel means someone is living, and you wound them by making leave the place. If the person is not living anymore, then you didn't do an act of chayvel. So, b'chlal, what's the whole issue? The Gemara is going to ask. We'll get to there tomorrow. So if you can cut a ben ches, the issue is that you're doing other things aside of Mila. That's the problem. But the act of Mila is not a problem. Then Tosfos says, even when you know the baby's 8th month developed, we are allowed to mal the baby on Shabbos and do all the preparations for Shabbos. When if the hair and the nails are developed, and he quotes the Gemara in Yavamis, based on Chazal's knowledge until today, that certain babies are fully formed in 7 months, there was another concept. The baby developed in 7 months. Elamat hung out in the mother's womb for another month, stayed there a little bit longer. So even though it came into the world 8 months after the conception, it developed in 7. And based on this Tosfos, we don't apply these dinim that the baby is muktzah. As long as the baby looks developed and we look at the hair and the nails, these dinim don't apply anymore. But anyway, let's come back to the Gemara. Times of Chazal, we did apply it. And if you knew Ben Shmoyne, the baby was muktzah, wow. And if you have a doubt whether it's Ben Shmoyne or Ben Ches, then you may not do the bris on Shabbos. We're going to get to that tomorrow, because who cares? If it's Ben Tes, if the baby is a Ben Ches, then he's basar mutar l'chatich basar. We're going to get to that in the next year. Okay. Says the Gemara. Itmar. Rav Amar. Halach is like the Tanach. The Tanach means the Tanach in the Brayso who understands that the Machloikes b'Shama and b'Silul is b'chlal. Forget about Shabbos. Whether you have to do a tofas dam bris if the baby was noiled mohul, again, a mitzias that we don't have today. And that is the Machloikes. It goes without saying that we always paskin like b'Silul. So when he says halachic Tanach, it means that a baby that's noiled mohul, since Beis says you don't need to do a bris, he's not choishish for arla kavusha, don't do a tofas dam bris. However, Shmuel says the halacha is like Rav Shimon ben Elazar, that yes, both of them agree that during the week, that's the way we're learning. There's a doubt, maybe there's an arla kavusha, and therefore you have to do hatafas dam bris. Rav Ada bar Ahava, Isyalid le'ahu yenuka, he had a child, he had a son, but when Kishu Mol, he was born Mol, and the 8th day was on Shabbos. Now the way we learned, even Rav Shimon ben Elazar, B'Shama and B'Silul, suspect an arla kavusha. No one subscribes to you doing anything on Shabbos. On Shabbos, you don't do it anymore. But he didn't learn that way. He felt that there is some sort of version in the Machlokes B'Shama and B'Silul, which halachically will conclude with, you do make a atafas dam bris even on Shabbos. But he went looking to 13 moyalim in the city, and all of them were of the opinion that on Shabbos you don't do it. So no one wanted to do a atafas dam bris. And he felt you have to do it. So what happened? A tragic story. He did it himself. And whatever he did is he cut inadvertently the member of his son, and he cut flesh in a place where he made him impotent, where he severed, he mutilated the organ of his child. And Amar, and he said afterwards, Tasili, the opposite of Kuf Yud Ches, all the Tasilis was, these were Amoraim that were saying that he did a mitzvah, so they're deserving of a certain schar. Tasili. Here it's the punishment. He said, Tasili, the Avri Adarav, because I, doing the Tafas dam bris on Shabbos, I went against Rav's interpretation of the Machlokes. The Gemara right away challenges, you only went against Rav, only Ramachman, as we learned the Braisa the whole time. Even Shmuel, when Shmuel says that they're both moida, that you need to do a tafas dam bris, we kept on adding the words, we suspect arla kavusha. So they both agree that b'chol you have to do it, but b'Shabbos faket, it's only a suspicion, it's only a suffix. No one learned that anyone will hold that on Shabbos you do it. Shabbos miyamar, takakash on him. So the Gemara answers, no. Who savar, he understands that the Shtana of Rav Shimon ben Elazar holds not that B'Shama and B'Silul suspect arla kavusha. His version was that B'Shama and B'Silul hold vaday arla kavusha. The Itmar, Rabbi Amar, the way we learned Pshat in the Shin and Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Chashin and Shema arla kavusha. Rabbi Yosef understands Pshat in Rav Shimon ben Elazar, vaday arla kavusha. How great is that? So Machlokes B'Shama and B'Silul, Machlokes Tanoim, what is their argument? And now there's a Machlokes Amoraim in the sheet of one of the Tanoim. And Amar Rabbi Yosef did not mean Allah that there is such a shita that vaday arla kavusha the Tanya. Another Braisa. Now this Braisa doesn't quote the Tanakama of it. It quotes Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor. And we're going to extrapolate that Not Rabbi Eliezer ben Kapor will hold that Beishamai and Beisilul hold Vadei are lekavusha. Rabbi Eliezer ben Kapor oimer lo nechem ko Beishamai Beisilul al noy lekishu mo should tzarich latem en lambris. Al ne nechleku. This is a third shita in their machlokes whether you're machalal Shabbos. That Beishamai oimer yes machalal Shabbos and Beisilul say you're not machalal Shabbos. So is Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor shita in their machlokes. Now that's only Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor. So lav mechlal. So be medayek that the Tanakama of this Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor, what does he hold? That both of them hold that you're machalal Shabbos. And who will that be? That's going to be Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Says the Gemara, no. How did Rabbi Yosef understand that from this brayso of Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor? Maybe the Dimot Tanakama divrei hakol emechalim fakert. Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor says that at least according to my version, according to Beis Shammai, you are mechalal. So the Gemara counters, you can't say that because in Kain Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor Tamad Beis Shammai also la'ashmei inon. That can't be because we have the rule, like Rashi reminds us, Beis Shammai, b'makom b'silol, ain't a Mishnah. But still the Gemara challenges Rabbi Yosef. No, I'll tell you another way of understanding that brayso of Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor. Dilma hachi ka'amar le'nechlu Beis Shammai b'silol b'davar zeh. And Rashi beautifully, right, Rashi divrei amaschel, im kein Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor, it's by the little dot. Says, I'm reading inside the Rashi, that umishanin and Dilma hachi ka'amar Rabbi Eliezer l'tanakama the Omar b'Shabbos l'divrei hakol ein mechalin. The Tanakama of this brayso holds that their machlokes is only during the week. That what that Beisilul says ein sorach latem en lambris, right? And Beis Shammai says yes. On that says Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor, no. During the week, Beisilul holds that you do have to do atofas lambris. Lesser. That's what Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor is saying. Ella, Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor holds that everyone holds Vadei Tzarich, and it's only Ubishabbos with the Plige. And according to this, it's going to come out that Rabbi Eliezer HaKapor is coming to tell you Shitas Beis Hillel. You, the Tanakama, hold that even in the week they don't have to do it. I'm telling you, no. During the week they're both Moida, the Tamid the Beis Hillel, and the Bechol Tzarich. Bottom line is there is no proof of Rabbi Yosef from this brayso that we will hold that both of them subscribe to Vadai or Lekavusha, so we're challenging his approach. But still, what for sure he violated on was on the Shita of Rav, because if not by Rav, there were other Amoraim that understood that in Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, maybe he meant not we suspect, but Vadai or Lekavusha. Okay, weiter. Says the Gemara Amar. We're going to begin with Amar Rabbo. So says the Musaydas Hashas in the bottom. Amar Rabbo, Amar Abasi. This is a shak din. Kol she'imoy tamei leida. Only when the mother is tamei because she gave birth, then do we say nima l'shmeina. However, kol she'ei nima tamei leida. If a woman gives birth and she's not tamei, what will that be? So Rashi, 5 lines from the bottom, gives 2 examples. Number 1, yoytze doifen, cesarean. Number 2, says Rashi, that the nachris sheyoldom, a non-Jewish woman gave birth, and then she converts the next day with her son. They both go to the mikvah. Before you go to the mikvah, by a guy, you have to give a bris. So here also, he wasn't, when she converted, there's no tumas leda by a non-Jewish woman. So there, says Ravasi, einim l'shmeina. You know when you do the bris milah? On day number 1. Or if the baby is converting when he's 2 days old or 3 days old, whenever, on the day that he's converting. And what's his proof? He has a very good proof. From where did we learn that milah is like a Shabbos? I know we had a whole amid, but we're going now that the word ubayoim hashmini is extra. So the bayoim, even the Shabbos. What do we have right before that pasuk? Isha kisazriya, the yolda zachar, the tama. Then the pasuk says, so he learns, if there is no vitama, then there's no bayom hashmini. No bayom hashmini doesn't mean later, it means earlier, on day number 1. Wow. Amalei Abaya can be, because doiros harishayim yerchichum. Doiros harishayim, says Rashi, before Matan Torah, there was no dinei tumantara. The last line in Rashi, v'loy nahago tuma. And in Parshas Lech Lecha, the Torah says Ben Shmeinas Yamim. We have the concept of 8 and not earlier. Benimo L'Shmeina. So L'Choida, this refutes Ravasi. So Amalei, guys, this is a very important cloud. So Ravasi responds, Nitna Torah, turning to the Kuf Lamed Hamad Beis, V'nischacha Halacha. Once the Torah was given, a new law goes into effect. We have a Yerushalmi that uses the words that Ein Lameidim Mikoida Matan Torah. Like the Rambam Paskins that today when you do a bris, even though the Nusach HaBracha is Lachnisa Bevrisa Shel Avram Avinu, but you have to know, why am I doing a bris now? Not because Hashem commanded Avram Avinu. I'm doing a bris because Hashem told my Zayde and my Neshama that was also there on Har Sinai that we, the Jewish people, have to circumcise our sons on the 8th day because of Sinai. It's good to know that that mitzvah was also given to Avram Avinu. And he's giving merit, and he's acknowledged for that. And it's called the covenant of Avram, but the obligation comes from Sinai. And because it was a new Torah, nitna Torah, v'neschach halacha. Still, the Gemara is challenging Ravasi, Eini. We learned that yoytze doifen, or mishi yesh le shtei arlois. Now, shtei arlois, Rashi brings two meanings. Either there's one member, but there are two arlois on top of it. So you have to do two cuttings. Or Rashi says someone who has to give him. One of them says, in both of these cases, you're Machal Shabbos. The other one says you're not Machal Shabbos. Now, Yoitze Doifen, right, we'll see soon why Yoitze Doifen, you're not Machal Shabbos. We'll see in a moment. What about the two organs? Let's go with the two Gidim. So the Meiri says, because we know for sure that you're only Mechuyev to mal one of them. Which one? The one that halachically is called the main one, but we don't know which one is the main one. So if you're going to be mal both of them, or even one of them, you might be circumcising the one that does not need to be circumcised. Again, let's go with that's chayvul. So you're doing an act of chayvul. So what's the kasha? The kasha is at kanlei pligi elul chalsa Shabbos, which implies abul shmeina vadim echalalinon. Because if one would hold that you don't do it on Shmeina, right? If it's not connected to the pasuk of Vayom Hashmini, Yimoil, or the whole source of being Mechalal Shabbos comes from Vayom Hashmini. So if the question is only Shabbos or not, which implies that no, they both are Moed La'eit, so everyone goes against Ravasi. So he says, no. Haba Hatalia. Let me ask you something. When we're focusing on the Yoitze Doifen, he says, no. That is also the Machlekes Amoraim over here. The one that says that you're Mechalal Shabbos on a Yoitze Doifen, he Taka will hold that we don't link it to Tumah. So Ubayom Hashmini goes to this person. Bayom Afilu B'Shabbos. The other Amoida that says that a Yoitze Doifen is not, you don't make a circumcision on Shabbos. You know why? Because you don't do it on the 8th day. If you don't do it on the 8th day, so it's not included in the Ubayom Hashmini. So it's the source that Yemachal Shabbos is not for someone who's being circumcised on any other day other than the 8th. And indeed, not only is it a Machlokes Amoraim, but also Kitanoi. And this Tana, this Braisa, is focusing on Psukim that we have in Parshas Lech Lecha, that it appears that the Torah is repeating something twice. The words in the pasuk there is Uben Shmeinas Yomim Yimoil Kol Zachar Lid Doiroi Seichem. And then the Torah clarifies who's the Kol Zachar. These are the words in the Chumash. Yelid Boyis Umiknas Kesef. Both someone that was born into your household and someone who you bought for money, referring to the purchase of a servant. Then in the next pasuk it says Himoil Yimoil Yelid Beischa Umiknas Kaspecha. So the kasha is, why does the Torah repeat twice that a bris milah has to be done both on a yelid bayis and on a miknas kaspuchan? As we'll see over here, none of them are referring to your child or to your grandchild. Both the yelid bayis and the miknas kesef is referring to someone who bought a shivcha kananis. Sometimes we will call the child a yelid bayis. That's because you bought the mother before she even got pregnant. Once you bought the mother, even before the baby was born, if the mother was already pregnant, that means you purchased her and the fetus, then we will refer to that child when it's born as miknas kaspecha. And the question is, why does the Torah have to give two psukim? And for that, says the Braisa, Yeshulid Bayis, Shenimar La'echad. There's a time that a Yilid Bayis will have his Bris Milah done when he's only 1 day old. However, the Yeshulid Bayis, that will be like a Yiddish child. Shenimar L'shmayna. Likewise, Yesh Miknas Kesev, Shenimar La'echad. Yesh Miknas Kesev, Shenimar L'shmayna. So before the Braisa explains all these cases, that just explains why there are 2 psukim. The Torah has to write in one pasuk that, again, ben shmeinas yamim yimar lochem hu yilid boyis umiknas kesef, and then there's another pasuk himal yimar yilid beischa miknas kaspacha. Sometimes on the first, sometimes now. What are all these cases? So now the Braisa explains yesh miknas kesef shneim li echad v'yesh miknas kesef shneim li shmeina keitzad lokach shivcha meuberes. The moment you buy a woman, we're speaking about when people sold themselves into slavery. People convolute with their confusion. How can you buy a slave? My friends, the slavery that's immoral is when someone is kidnapped and sold into slavery. That is outlawed by the Torah. It's outlawed in the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal, for which you get a capital punishment. You are killed, is stealing a person. Here we're speaking about someone who sold themselves into slavery. That's a whole different mitzias. Okay. So now, since you bought this woman while she was already pregnant, we view the fetus as someone who you purchased. And then she gave birth. So the din is, miknas kesef, since she gave birth while she was already in the possession of the Yiddish owner, that's nimel l'shmeina. You bought a mother and a child, and the child was 1 day old. Miknas kesef nimel echad. Next, yesh yilid bayis shenimar l'shmeina. Yilid bayis means you not your children. Again, someone who is a slave, but you purchased the mother before she got pregnant. That's a normal case. Keitzad lokach shivcha, then v'nesabra etzloi, and then v'yolda. So since even her conception was while she already belonged to you, the baby is called yilid bayis. He was born into your house. You didn't buy him. That's yilid bayis hanimar l'shmeina. Now, before we go on, what does that? That's as a blanket statement from the Tanach, that if you bought it before your birth, if you bought it, right? No, it's you way before. So then it's always on the 8th day. Before we go on, Rav Chama, I know it's Rav. Rav normally is the title of an Amayra, but some few Tanoim lived in Bavel and they did not get smicha, and therefore they're not called Rabbi. This Rav Chama is part of the Braisa, so he's a Tana. Rav Chama says, no. There is a case where even though you bought it before birth, it's not going to be nimel l'shmeina, which is you bought the mother before the mother got pregnant, okay? But the mother did not convert. The mother was in your possession without. Now, when I say conversion, what conversion? Yeah, conversion. That an Eved Kanani and a Shifcha Kananis have to be taken to the mikvah, and they're mekabel on themselves the avdus, which includes from the moment they go to the mikvah, they're obligated to keep all of the negative commandments and some of the positive commandments, more or less like the chiyuv that we have on Jewish women. Now, what happens if a person buys a shifcha and they bechlal did not begin the conversion process? They didn't go to the mikvah. So that's the case that if Yolda, and only after the baby was born, then the mother and the baby went to the mikvah, according to Rav Chama, that's also a yilid bayis shenimar la'echad. So now we already have a case of yilid bayis shenimar la'echad. However, according to Rav Chama, hitbila, if you purchased the mother and she went to the mikvah, as should be by every eved and shivcha, and again, you purchased her before she conceived. That's the yilid bayis, and even according to Rav Chama, is nimar l'shmeina. Now, end of Braisa says now the Gemara, again, we're looking for machlekes tanoim, whether a woman who doesn't have tumas leida, whether the baby is circumcised on the first day like Ravasi or not. How does it relate to our machlekes? Of course it does, because the Tanakama, not Rav Chama, leishana lei bein tefilla v'achakach yolda bein yolda v'achakach tefilla. The Tanakama Taka holds that if you buy a non-Jewish slave, even whether she went to the mikvah or not, now this makes a big difference. Because if she goes to the mikvah, she's included in the dinim of tuma. If she didn't go to the mikvah yet, l'shem avdus, but then she has no dinim of a yid. There's no tumas later. In both cases, what does the Tanakama hold? Tanakama holds that she's nimo l'shmaina. That's the shita that does not link Tuma of the mother and the day of the bris. And Afchama that says no, that if she bechlal didn't go to the mikvah and she only went to the mikvah after the baby was born, that baby is a yelid bayish nimo le'echad. That's shita b'ramasi. Why nimo le'echad? That's the reason, because since the mother is not to me'aleda, then there's no bris on the 8th day. Beautiful. So now we already showed us some machlokes today. Now we're going to analyze the brayso itself. We're going to skip the words Amarov. Says the Gemara, Bishlam el Avchama, Bishkachas lo yelid bayis nimo le'echad. And we have a yelid bayis nimo l'shmaina. And we have a case of miknas kesef nimo le'echad. And we have a case of the miknas kesef nimo le'ches. And now the brayso is going, the Gemara is going to speak out all the cases. Yolda v'achar kach etpila, ze yelid bayis nimo le'echad. That was the case of Rav Chama. However, if hitbila, you buy a woman, she goes to the mikvah, then she conceives, then she gives birth. That's the yelid bayis nimo le'ches. Likewise, we have a case of miknas kesef nimo l'shmaina kigoin that shalakach shivcha me'uberes. That means that's why it's called miknas kesef, because you bought her when she's already pregnant, and then she went to the mikvah. V'achar kach yolda. That's a ches. And the final case, we have a scenario of miknas kesef nimo le'echad. Where will that be? Where will that be? Oh, according to Rav Chama. So he gives a great example. Even though we already had one, we're giving another example. If two people purchase this pregnant woman, they bought a shivcha me'uberes, and she went to the mikvah before she gave birth, right? So according to Rav Chama, she's tamei later. Why would the bris be on echad? He says gavaldik. And here's Rashi. He introduces the following word, that in the beginning in Parshas Lech Lecha, the first pasuk that we quoted, that says, "Uben shmoinas yamim yimoil lochem kol zachar." So Chazal learned from the word lochem that when are we obligated to circumcise the sons of our avadim? Only when lochem, which means they are dumya lochem. And if they are not dumya lochem, then they have to be circumcised, but not on the 8th day, on the 1st day. So how is it not dumya lochem? Pashit, by that, look inside the Rashi, 6 lines under the Gemara. The kiven the ein labal ha'ubar chelik be'imay. One guy bought the fetus, one guy bought the mother. Who's mechuyev to circumcise the baal of the baby? Since he has no ownership in the mother, lav dumya lochem. Because lochem, we are related to our wives and to our children, a whole different type of relationship, correct? But we're connected both to the mother and to the child. Here, if you're b'chlal not connected to the mother, according to this dumya lochem need, then it's nimo le'echad. Let's go back inside the Gemara. Which one was not explained? How is it shaykh for you to have a yelid bayis? Yelid bayis means you bought the mother before she even conceived. And then the baby will be nimo le'echad. Since the Tanakama does not need for the mother to be included in Tumas Leda, means even if she's not Tamei, still the baby is Nimo L'Shmoina. So how will the baby be Nimo L'Echad? Nimo L'Echad L'Shkachas Lo. So Amar Rav Yirmiyah B'Lekeach Shivcha Lo'ubara. The answer will always be the same. That since in the pasuk in Lech Lecha we have Uben Shmoinas Yomim Yimoy Lochem L'Kula Alma. The concept that there has to be dumya lochem will apply. So if it's completely not dumya lochem, then we don't say the law of the 8th. You have to circumcise, but not on the 8th. What's that? You b'chlal don't own the mother. You b'chlal did not buy the mother. You only bought the child. You bought the mother before she conceived. But the only ownership you have is in her fetus. 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Dafilu mi Yisrael, even if the mother did go to the mikvah, and the mother will be Tamei Leda, which is really irrelevant according to the Tanakama. Here already, lav dumya de lochem. Hoyel ve'ein loy chelek be'imay at all. No one owns the mother here. Says the Gemara, Hanicha l'man da'amar king and Periscope lav king and aguf dami. A big machlokes Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yechanan. When you buy the fruit of a tree, is it tantamount to you having ownership in the guf? If I buy your fruits and not buy your tree, it's not that I own the tree, But since I own the fruit from the tree, doesn't mean that I have some ownership in the tree. And that's a machlekes hamayroim. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, kinyan aperes, latke kinyan aguf. So when you buy a shivcha le'ubara, that's for peres, you have no ownership in the mother. It's not dumi alochem. So then, even according to the Tanach, it makes sense to say that it's not included in the uben shmeinas yom. But according to the Lamanda Amar, which is Rabbi Shlakish, kinyan peres kinyan aguf, so it's back dumi alochem. So again, what will be the scenario according to the Tanach that you can have a yelid bias? That means you bought the mother before she got pregnant, and it's going to be nimala echad. Why will it be nimala echad? Before we go on, the Rebbe explains beautifully that the machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, whether kinyan aperes or kinyan aguf, has to do with Rabbi Yochanan representing a tzaddik and Reish Lakish representing a bal tshuva, or let's use our words now, a beinani, in our context. And why do we learn in Tanya that a tzaddik is someone who, through his and her effort in getting hold of their paytas would mean here, their levushim, they completely transform their guf, meaning over here, their midas, right? Their and moichen, the inner person. But most of us don't have that power. We have the koyach over the paytas, we're all responsible, but we're not responsible, and therefore we cannot fully transform the inner. That's mamish this concept. But Rabbi Yochanan holds, once you make a kinyan in the paytas, then you're going to have, Rabbi Yochanan says, kinyan paytas, not kinyan aguf. It's just because you are in charge of a machshava dibur u'maisa, you're a beinani, you're not yet a tzaddik. You're not yet a tzaddik. The Shlakish holds that's the most you can do. You cannot reach the level. A person who's not born a tzaddik cannot reach the level of transforming their inner part. So therefore, he considers kinyan paytas is like a kinyan aguf. You did the best you could. But back over here, we're just looking for a case that's not dumi lachem, even according to the Tanach. Really, it's not, a person should never own an eved if they will not go to the mikvah l'shem abdus and therefore take upon themselves the obligation like a woman, all of the negative commandments and only some of the positive commandments. But coming back over here, if the mother will never go to the mikvah, then look inside 3 lines in the Rashi before the bottom of the Amid. In conclusion, whether we link the 8 days of a bris to the fact that the mother is tamei or not, this is the machlokes here in Tanoim, and Rabbi Amar Abasi paskins that whenever the mother is not tamei leida, by a Yiddish child, the bris will be done on the first day. Okay, Chavra, we have time, so let's begin the new sugya now. Tanyam, guys, we're going to introduce here a Bamba Kash. Okay, now that we established that a Safek bris is not doiches Shabbos, really the Gemara is going to show you that every baby is a Safek nefel. The word nefel means a non-viable child. A non-viable child, like we mentioned in the times of Chazal, if the baby was born on the 8th month, we presumed that the baby will not live. He's muktzah. And even if you don't know or you think that the baby was born on the 9th month, maybe not, maybe it's the 8th month, maybe he was conceived a month later, at least it's a doubt. And I'm going to prove to you that in other areas of halacha, we always consider a baby doubtful whether it's going to survive or not. Where do we see that from? From the din of opinion aben. Really, a Bukhar has to be redeemed from a kohen. But the Torah says that redemption only happens when the baby is 30 days old. Really, it's on the day 31. It's 30 days have to pass. Why do we have to wait 31 days for 30 days to pass? Because before that, we can argue, why do I have to give you the kohen money? I only have to redeem a viable child. Maybe this child is not going to live. And let's read it inside. Tanya, only after a baby lives for 30 days, then do we say Eina Nefel. And Shenemar, as it says, a pasuk in Kairach, Upeduyav, Meben Chodesh Tifte. Meben Chodesh means after 30 days passes. Similarly, Shmoina Semen Bebehema Eina Nefel. And how do we know that? From the fact that on Parshas Emor, the Torah tells us that only Umiyoim Hashmini V'Halo Yeiratzel Karben. Why do we have to wait 8 days? to bring a carbon from an animal, because before that you don't know whether it's alive or not. Now, parenthetically, just to know a nice link, we mentioned a few days ago that we compare a bris in the Gemara to a carbon, two limudim from a carbon. And taka, that's another uben shmeina, just like by a carbon, we have something similar by a bris. But coming back over here, asks the Gemara, what do we see from this Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, that if the baby did not reach 30 days, then we say, at least it's a suffix. We taka don't know whether it's viable or not. Daf kuf lamed vav. So now the kasha is, mimal hecha mahalinale. How can we ever do a bris on Shabbos? Right, look inside the top Rashi. Mimal hecha mahalinan shum katen b'yom hashmini b'Shabbos, because dilma nefelu v'lechazi lamu. And that's the whole daf we learned kuf lamed hey. That was the whole Mishnah, that a suffix is not you're not mechalel Shabbos. Now, what is the issue of doing a bris on Shabbos? So let's speak out over here, Rashi. V'oise chabura. Chabura is connected to shchita, netilas neshama, and taka bayoim hashmini, bayoim afilu b'Shabbos, but that's only if there's a mitzvah. You have a doubt. How can you be mechal Shabbos based on a doubt? And the way we learned the traces on that kuflamei, the top traces, that the orlos soy, to be mamay the suffix is only an asmachta. It's a sfara. How can you be machal Shabbos if you have a doubt whether you could or not? So Amarav Ado Barahava, no, bris itself is not a problem, and that puts in context everything we learned today, as we'll continue, God willing, tomorrow. That when there's a doubt, the meal itself is not a problem. It's everything else that you do around the meal that becomes a problem. The meal itself, because im chayu. If he's a viable baby, right? Then shaper kumal. But the imlav means, let's say the baby is not viable, so halachically he has a din of a nefel, halachically is an evan, halachically is not alive. So who cares? You're cutting flesh. Beautiful. Now hold on. We have a few minutes, which is perfect. Rashi holds here, and we already read Rashi a few times before, that a bris milah is connected to the problem of oisa chabura, and Danny's not here. And that we get chabura. You can only make a chabura on something that's alive. If something is not alive, machatich babasar. But let's go up. The Rabbeinu Hanano says that the reason why one mila on Shabbos, what's machal the issue? Tikkun. And this also fits, because tikkun, you know, when taking off the arla is an act of tikkun, which is prohibited. If there's a chiyuv to take off the arla, if the baby, God forbid, is not living, then it's not called an act of tikkun. Even though we have a Kabbalah and we have a minig that if, God forbid, a baby passes away before the bris, we don't bury them before the bris. But that's not enough to say that it's an act of tikkun. So since it's not an act of tikkun, you're doing nothing. Machatich babas. The Rambam links doing a bris with mefarek. That's already a bigger problem. Mefarek, right, is a tulda of dash. Now we know that by dash, right, I cannot remove a juice from an orange, not because the orange is alive. The orange is not alive. The orange is off the tree already. I cannot extract juice from inside something else. So if the problem of a bris is mefarek, is dash, so how do you understand this Gemara? What does it help that if the baby is not alive, machatich babasar? No, I can't do dash to basar. So from here, the Pri Megadim writes a klal that in most avos, if you're doing it for a different kavana, it's going to go into the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon. But there are certain avos that if you are not doing it bekavana, then you're not violating it at all. And one of them is mefarek. Mefarek means that I give my example of orange juice. You have to have kavana to get the juice out of the orange. If that is not your kavana, you're doing nothing. The only kavana of taking blood out, that's the issue. It's not the cutting, it's the taking the blood out of the bris, is only if you're doing it l'shem mitzvahs bris. If the baby is not living, then you don't need the blood to go out. Then your kavana is not for the blood. The moment you don't have that kavana, you're not doing anything. Even though it's psikresha, we don't add psikresha. Here, your kavana is everything. And finally, the Shita Mikobetzes holds that the act of Mila is problematic because it's goizes. And here again, everyone asks, if it's goizes, But when the animal is dead already, we're not allowed to shear the hair off the back of the animal, even though it's babasar. So the Devar Avram says Gavaldik. He says that, you know what goizes means? Goizes means that you're cutting something that's oimed lihinatel. So hair off the animal, the hair is oimed lihinatel. Nails is oimed lihinatel. Cutting a limb off an animal, cutting a piece off a limb is not oimed lihinatel. In other words, goizes is sharing. What happens if a person cuts a limb off a living animal? He's not chayv goizes. He didn't do. He's chayv chayvel. Why is he not chayv goizes? Because the hand, the forearm, was not meant to be cut off. When is the artla meant to be cut off? If there's a mitzvah. When is there a mitzvah if the baby is living? If the baby is not living, it's not meant to be cut off. If it's not oimed lihinatel gavaldik, then there's no goizes. So whether it's because of shchita, right, chabala, whether it's because of tikkun, whether it's mefarik, whether it's goizes, none of them apply if the baby is not living. So therefore, mimanavshach, Taka, you're right. We don't know if the baby is viable or not. But mimanavshach, you can do a bris on the 8th day. The question will be, that will continue tomorrow. So what was the whole daf we learned today in the beginning? So why is the suffix not doicha Shabbos? Why not? Mimanavshach, if it's not living, I'm talking about the case where it's not living, not other sfeikas. If it's not living, then what's the problem? And the answer will be, the problem won't be the milah. The problem will be that we're following Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer holds that when you can do a bris, you can also be mechal Shabbos for the machshirim of the bris. So here the baby is really not alive. The act of chituch won't be a problem, but the machshirim will be a problem, even according to Rabbi Eliezer. God willing to be continued. Good.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What happens if the baby survives after the brit? Does the baby considered alive?
So again,
let's say the baby grows up.
No, once it hits 30 days, of course. Yeah.
So is there a differentiation? Do we say that is it tchiyat metim?
No. We don't say that. We don't say that because hadeu ke'evan, because we're following a roiv. But now that the baby lived, that's a raya that he's from the minority that survived, even though he's a ben ches. Doesn't have a din of tchiyas hameis.
Mechatach bevasar. Does that apply for raw meat?
Yeah. No, I can cut raw meat on Shabbos.
You could, even if you know it's going to bleed and everything.
Yeah, mamash for all this, because what's the problem? There's no din of, you're not being mesakin, you're not fixing, you're cutting it. You're not being mefarek, that's the word, because when you cut meat, since your kavana is not, I'll give you a great example. Can I cut an orange on Shabbos? That's a good example that Pri Megadim gives. Can I cut an orange when psik reisha, I should have said that, psik reisha, juice will come out, juicy orange. I could. I'm mefarek. I don't have kavana. I psik reisha, doesn't matter here. Your kavana is to cut the orange. You don't need the juice. You're not doing it for the juice. No problem.
And the other sfeikas are less than even if the baby is alive or not. The other sfeikas should be even more lenient then. If we're saying that the baby...
No. If the baby is alive,
we don't know exactly when they're born.
If the baby is alive, and let's say this baby maybe does not need to be bimal on the 8th day, then or maybe today is not the 8th day.
Correct.
That's you got a problem.
But you could say that if it's considered not alive, that's even more of a suffix than the other sfeikas, you could say.
No. If a baby is ben hashmashes,
right? So you don't know when.
You have to do a brit. I want the blood. I'm doing tikkun. I'm doing mefarik. I'm doing that. But on the 8th day, God gives a dispensation. But if it's not the 8th day, then you're doing a chilul Shabbos.
Okay.
Guys, let's go daven.